of phantoms and monsters. They exist among us, and sometimes they win. Even the devil was an angel once. The world has its own rules, and these rules are not human. Some of us seek answers to the origin and existence of cryptids and the unexplained. Join us as we venture beyond the known and accepted boundaries. Welcome to our nightmare. I think you're going to like it.
Hey, folks, good evening and welcome to Phantoms Monsters Radio. Thanks for joining me. Now, we had a bit of a screw up last week. I was trying to put Windows 11 in into the computer and it kind of knocked everything out. So it took me most of the week to get everything back in. So again, I apologize for last week, but we've got Tobias with us tonight and we'll be talking about his book and about the Chicago Mothman. But first of all, the Phantoms of Monsters radio channel is made possible by you clicking on the subscribe and like buttons and by you sharing our programming. Super chat and super thanks donations are always appreciated. And you can click the dollar icon located below the chat box. The Buy Me a Coffee link and banner are also shown below, so thanks for your consideration. Now, I want to welcome all new members to the channel, as well as first-timers into the chat. Now, if you are listening to me for the first time, please like and subscribe to the channel. Set your notifications at the bell icon so you receive word when the new presentation is live or being posted onto the channel. And if you're in the chat and you do have a question, please use all caps. So tonight I have Tobias Wayland joining me, who's a Fortean investigator who's been actively investigating the unusual for over a decade. The first several years of his investigative career were spent as a MUFON field investigator, and following that, he investigated independently prior to becoming the head writer and editor for the Singular Fortean Society. Now, Tobias is a frequent guest on various podcasts and radio shows, has written several books, and contributed articles to periodicals on the paranormal, as has appeared on television and in documentaries, and is also often invited to speak at paranormal conferences and events. Now, he was featured in the series premiere of Expedition X and Small Towns Monsters documentaries Terrors in the Sky, and on the trail of the Lake Michigan Mothman for his work investigating Mothman sightings around Lake Michigan. Now, he and his wife, Emily, have been involved with the Lake Michigan Mothman investigation since its advent in the spring of 2017 and published a book chronicling the experience, the Lake Michigan Mothman High Strangeness in the Midwest. His second and third book about unusual phenomena, Strange Tales of the Impossible, and the Singular Fortean Society's Yuletide Guide to High Strangeness, continue their work in investigating a variety of seemingly impossible events. Now, in the Singular Fortean Society Yuletide Guide to High Strangeness, Tobias and Emily take you on a journey into the darkest part of the year. Winter has always been a time of magic, monsters, and legendary figures. Their stories are told and retold through across generations. But what if there was something more? Some authentic human experiences that inspired these stories, so often told around the campfires, as much to drive back the shadows as to provide warmth. So in the book, the Waylands look at Christmas legends and compare them to modern anomalous phenomena to see what similarities exist. From sheep squatch to Santa Claus, the Singular Fortean Society's Yuletide Guide to High Strangeness covers a wide variety of reported sightings that might represent a startling truth about the stories we tell. So, Tobias, welcome to the show.
Hey, Lon. Good to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. We haven't, I don't even know if we talked since we came back from Chicago. I don't know. But
it's been a while.
Yeah, it's first time you've been back on the show.
Yeah, I mean, other than just kind of chatting online and Messenger and stuff, it's been a while.
Yeah, that's hard to believe. It's been over 6 months ago, isn't it?
Yeah, boy, I mean, time flies. Feels like we were just
Oh my
there.
god. Yeah, it's weird. So tell us about the book. It's that time of year, so let's talk to the audience about it and tell us what's in it.
Sure. So, this is a book that is probably self-explanatory, somewhat based just on the title. It kind of includes what I'm getting at in there, the Singular Fortean Society's Yuletide Guide to High Strangeness. But it's probably helpful to unpack that somewhat. So what we were really going for was we wanted to cover all of these weird Christmas legends and stories that don't necessarily get a lot of attention otherwise. So think like Krampus and the Yule cat, Yule goat, Gorilla, Frau Perkta, and those kinds of characters, and of course Saint Nicholas and Santa Claus and all that stuff. But that had been done. Like there are other books out there that talk about the history of those figures. And so while that's still interesting, and I did include lots of historical facts and data, it couldn't just be that. It had to be more, right? And so something that has always fascinated me is the origin of these stories. And something I think you'll find, much like when researching fairy lore, for instance, when you look into a lot of these Christmas legends and the folklore around them, you'll see a startling resemblance to paranormal phenomena that's still reported today. There are myriad examples of that in the book, of course. But if I had to pick one off the top of my head, I would say looking at the wild hunt, for instance. Now, this is something, of course, that has long been associated with the Yuletide season, and it can take many forms. Everything from fairy troops of underground dwelling beings coming to the surface, like in the legend of Asgardre, or Odin leading the spectral wild hunt with the spirits of dead warriors, Frau Perkta leading her ethereal troop of dead children. They all have this commonality of supernatural figures leading troops of spirits and other supernatural figures, right? And what's interesting about that is so much of the stories told about those phenomena mirror uh, paranormal phenomena still reported today. So if you look at something like Asgard's Ray, right? Like that's something where there is this supposed fairy troop roaming around Christmas time, and you don't want to run into them because lots of things bad, mostly bad, could happen to you if you do. So you might experience missing time. You might be taken away. These things that we still see normally associated with things like alien abduction. And furthermore, in some of the stories told about this specific form of wild hunt, there are home invasions. One of the most popular stories involves this fairy troop that basically takes over these people's house. And one of the things it really reminded me of was Whitley Strieber's first remembered experience with extraterrestrials, these otherworldly beings. Where he first noticed this loud whooshing sound throughout their house, and it was calamitous, right? Like there was a sense of tumult, like And then of course his house is invaded, or his cabin rather, up in upstate New York, is invaded by these diminutive beings, which in their own right are generally very similar, at least in the most general of terms, with fairies and such, specifically, diminutive sort of underground dwelling ones. And so it's fascinating to me to look at those stories and sort of wonder, well, what inspired those? Like, certainly they were told during the darkest time of the year as a form of entertainment, certainly. But what if the inspiration for them is the same inspiration we have for people telling those stories today? That is to say, they could be based on some actual real life experiences. And if that's the case, then I think that these Christmas legends deserve to be paid more attention than just as a sort of trivial entertainment.
The now my family is originally from Switzerland, and several years ago I started looking into some of the traditions. The town I was at, my family was actually from, was near Zurich along the lake. The town was Richtersville, and of course, you talk about the Krampus, as far as the legend with Black Pete and Krampus and all that other stuff. But they have a tradition there, which I find fascinating. They have a Christmas turnip festival. And what they do, they hollow out turnips, put lights in them, and string them all over the town. And people come from all over the place to see these lighted turnips all throughout the town. It's bizarre. I've seen some pictures of it. I mean, they light the whole town up with these lit turnips. It's just really weird.
Wow. Like, do they carve them like jack-o'-lanterns or anything?
Yeah, exactly. They get pretty good sized turnips, and then they hollow them out, and then they put a couple holes in it, and they put a candle or a light in it, and they string them up.
Huh.
It's just the damnest thing I've ever seen.
That is. Well, weren't turnips the original jack-o'-lanterns? Because pumpkins are native to this continent. They wouldn't have those in Ireland or any place. So I think they used turnips before the tradition of Halloween actually came to North America.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's some kind of connection there.
I don't know.
That's so interesting.
I don't know what, I had to look that up, but no, of course I was looking into the Krampus thing and all that, but then somebody had something come up about the turnip festival around Christmas, and I'm thinking, what the hell are they talking about? And they carve it, they hollow out these turnips and make lights out. I don't know. The whole area it's a farming community, but it's a city, and it's bizarre. So I guess if we examined every little burg in Europe, we'd find all kinds of weird traditions. But I just found that fascinating.
That's really interesting. And you're right. And that's something that I actually noticed in my research for this book, is there are so many different iterations of the folklore surrounding this holiday, Christmas and the Yuletide season. And it does vary, like region to region. It could vary village to village, and so, like, it's so interesting to see some of those localized traditions, like what you're talking about. Like, now I'm going to have to start carving turnips and hanging them up around here.
I don't know. I don't know if it's got some type of good luck symbolism or whatever. I don't know what it is, but the turnip festival. So
it could just be, it could just be that it's a convenient thing that you can carve out and light up, because decorating your space with lights this time of year, I mean, that goes way back, because it's the darkest time of the year, right? And so
Sure.
when people believed that the darkest time of the year also brought with it, ghosts and spirits and capricious fairies and things, you would want to light your space up. You would have feasts like Yule where you would light bonfires and things, and try to illuminate your surroundings as much as possible. So who knows if it has anything to do with like turnip specifically, other than that we already know from Ireland that they're relatively convenient root vegetables that you could hollow out and put a candle in there and they'll light up okay. So who knows?
Mm. Well, folks can go to your website and buy the book, right?
Oh, definitely. So, of course, you can go to singularfortean.com/books, and you'll find a couple of buttons there if you do, just under the picture of the book. Actually, the lovely cover drawn by my wife, Emily. And you can go to buy it on Amazon. You can buy a signed copy from us if you'd like. And yeah, I hope people do. I think they'll really like it.
Well, interesting. So, anyway, we've been looking into the Chicago Mothman, Lake Michigan Mothman phenomena now. It seems like it's been forever. You and I together have been looking at it since 2017 in the iteration of the new sightings, but this has really been going on for a long time. So, folks, if you do have any questions, please use all caps, put it in the chat, and I'll bring it up there. And I do want to mention that the last time we were on, we had talked about some of the earlier sightings from this year. But since that time, I think we've had 5 sightings. And in fact, there was one in and I don't know how many of these people did you talk to? The one in Pilsen, did you talk to that girl that saw the thing under the overpass?
Let me think. I don't believe I was able to speak to her specifically. I'm going to pull some of these up because it would be helpful, I think, to be able to see them. Do you remember when that one took place? Like what year that was? It was reported recently, but was it in older sighting?
Yeah, she it was an older sighting. I think it was about 2 or 3 years old. She had seen this thing, but never really acted on it. But first of all, she called me. She now let's see. Let me see here what she said. I asked her to send me the information. She said, "Lon, I just got off the phone with you this morning. Here's the location and where I saw it. It was she said she was walking through the underpass near South Laughlin Street and West 6th and encountered a 7-foot tall winged humanoid. She said she had just parked her car to see her boyfriend at the time, which was in the Pilsen community. It was October 2019. I parked almost 2 blocks from his building. It was really late, and I was walking past the under of this bridge. Standing underneath, reminiscing, I saw a 7-foot humanoid with veiny bat-like wings, face towards the wall, not directly staring at me, but just standing. I got super creeped out, so I started walking to where I needed to be. But when I look back, I know for sure that I saw something very strange. Now, she said a couple years later, I remember seeing that creature and decided to do some research. Turns out many people in Chicago, and look, she didn't know anything about it, had seen similar just blocks away from there. So, yeah, I had talked to her and very forthright witness. She seemed to be affected by the sighting. She literally moved out of Chicago right after that. And I asked her, what was that sighting the reason why? She said, well, it contributed to it. So I don't know, but it did seem like a very interesting sighting. And I do believe she saw that thing.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's fair enough. You know what is really interesting to me?
Let's see.
about this particular sighting is that word reminiscing. She describes this creature as standing under this bridge, and she's saying that the creature looked like it was reminiscing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
what she meant. Yeah.
that's such a
I don't know.
unique way to describe that.
It's an odd word. Well, I don't think we've ever had anybody say that before, have we?
No, I'm just picturing Mothman, and and he's kind of standing under this bridge, and maybe he's smoking a cigarette, just kind of staring into the distance. I, I don't mean to like make fun, but I mean it's just such an unusual way for somebody to describe this creature. So I wonder, I wish I could get a little more detail to kind of try to suss out maybe exactly what the witness meant, because I think we both know that a lot of witnesses struggle to find the words to describe their experiences, because they are
Hmm.
so powerful, and they're so weird, like they're so far outside of people's understanding. So I wonder if this is one of those cases where the creature just appeared strange, or maybe she was sort of struggling to make sense of it, and applied this very human emotion, right, to this creature, because we've seen that plenty of times too, where people will sort of anthropomorphize these creatures, whatever they are, and sort of project a human emotion or motivation, to try to make sense of what's going on, which is only natural. Like we try to make sense of these things,
Hmm.
right? So, but yeah, that's an interesting
Well, yeah,
one.
it's like when people compare it to the Jeepers Creepers monster
Mhm.
from the films or what other. It's interesting that people use what they're familiar with for the descriptions. But that Jeepers Creepers description we've heard dozens of times from witnesses.
That's come up quite a bit. Let's see, we've got that.
Yeah.
Shayna and Barbara down in Rockford, I think they compared it to Marcus from Underworld, which I'm not terribly familiar with, but apparently he is a large,
It's a vampire.
scary,
It's a
yeah,
vampire.
winged vampire
Yeah.
thing. So
Yeah.
similar to Jeepers Creepers, probably. And what was
It's
trying to
it's
think?
pretty bizarre.
It is. I thought there might be a third one, but I can't think of it right now. I'll probably think of it later. But yeah, no, it does happen because, again, like we were just talking about, people really struggle to try to describe this stuff, and they end up trying to relate it to something familiar. So a character from a
Mhm.
movie is a lot easier than trying to come up with the words to really describe this impossible thing you saw.
Well, we got a bunch of questions, so let's just go ahead and start whittling this down. This is from Robo 1776. Has anyone expressed or had experienced physical contact, accidental or otherwise, with the Mothman? What do you have to say about that?
Sure. Well, the case that comes to mind immediately for me was from Waukegan in the 1970s, and this actually came to me from the witness's daughter. The witness unfortunately had passed away, but his daughter came to me and wanted to tell me about what had happened to her dad. And so she told me about how one night he had gone out, and it was pretty late, and he needed to go help his friend jumpstart his car. His car battery had died, and so her dad heads out, and he ends up going to this relatively isolated parking lot with not a lot by it. I think there were just a couple of like taller silos and things. And as he's out there, he's helping his friend, get started jumping his battery. And he said, uh, all of a sudden, he felt this feeling of fear, and so it just came over him. And so he starts looking around. And when he does that, he sees this winged being, this creature, up on top of one of these silos, and it's got these red eyes, and he's not going to stick around at this point. Like, he and his friend decide that the car can wait. They're going to get the hell out of there, and so they jump into the man's car and take off. And I guess this thing swooped down at them and followed and scratched his car up, like started attacking his car on the way out. And the woman with whom I spoke said that he had come home and he was obviously very visibly shaken, and he had told his story, and she had seen the scratches on his car and everything. And so obviously she took it very seriously. And it wasn't until, of course, we started publishing these reports from other witnesses that she saw that somebody else had experienced something similar to what her dad had, and decided to finally come forward. But yeah, that's one of the few cases involving some kind of physical contact that I'm aware of. I don't think there have been a ton, so I don't want people to think that this
No.
Waukegan story is representative, but it has been reported at least once.
Yeah, I had and this was from 2015, where a gentleman, and it came third hand. I mean, it was a friend of his. His parents were literally attacked by this thing as they were driving in Chicago, and they claimed that it was following them home and attacking the car, and they just tried to outrun it, then went the back way to get home. And when they got home, they looked around, and it was still daylight, but I think it was getting later in the evening, and they got out of the car, and the woman stepped out of the car, and this thing attacked her from behind and scratched her back and left a pretty deep laceration. In fact, they had to go to the hospital and have it closed up. I just imagine what they told the doctor, but he didn't know that, but it came from a friend of his. And I don't know, that's really the only physical contact that I had received from anybody. And I didn't even put it on the map. I didn't put it as part of the list, but it was something I figured, well, if something similar to that happens, then I'll put it up there. But this is one thing about this phenomenon, for the most part, especially since 2017, is that we're just not seeing much physical aggressiveness. They can bluff charge sometimes, but it's very minimal. They just scare the living hell out of people. But as far as actually making physical contact, it just doesn't seem to happen.
Sure. Well, using that Waukegan sighting as an example, I have no doubt that if that thing, whatever it was, wanted to hurt this guy, wanted to actually ambush him and his friend, it definitely could have. They had no idea that it was there. I think that at least the way the story was told, the way it sounds, it's more likely that the fear was something imposed on them. It almost feels like the fear was projected onto them, because maybe the thing wanted to scare him away. Maybe it didn't want to hurt him. I think that if there was some intent to harm, that we would see people being injured, but we're not. It's just not happening.
Yeah. So let's see here. That's the old one. This next one from Whack Cackle. Are Mothman sightings usually reported with a sulfur smell or corpse smell? Well, I can tell you that just isn't the case. The only odor that I can remember, and I think it happened on either 2 or 3 occasions, was an ammonia smell. Am I right about that, Tobias?
Yeah, I don't believe we have received a lot of reports of strong smells. There are some things to take into account there, though. I suppose the first one being often sightings take place in cars, in motor vehicles, and so if there was a strong odor, you might not notice it. The other is some of the or a good number of the sightings are not super close. People are at some distance. However, even in those sightings where witnesses report being, in point blank range, really, with these things, we're not getting a lot of reports of unusual smells. Not sulfur or anything similar. It's a good question though, because
Yeah.
that is reported in a good number of weird creature sightings. Bigfoot, dogman, that kind of thing. But it's not something I recall seeing associated with these winged humanoid sightings.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. Savage Grammy. Have Mothman ever been spotted inside homes or mostly outside? I think they've been mostly outside. I mean, I have had people contact me and said they saw them in buildings at some point, but and I know other sightings, not necessarily those in Chicago, but in other places, just like Point Pleasant. I mean, some of those that were seen inside in the TNT plant and other places, but in Chicago, that's been fairly rare.
Yeah, true. I can think of one off the top of my head, and this was a woman and her daughter in Madison, Wisconsin, a while back. It's a couple decades ago, and they had a sighting just off the Beltline near Seminole Highway, and the daughter was pretty young, and so she didn't really see the creature, but her mother did, and it had a huge impact on her. She described sort of the typical Mothman experience of seeing this large black winged red-eyed creature that scared the crap out of her. And later she was at their apartment and she went downstairs into their laundry room, and while she was down there, she said that she saw the same thing lurking about in one of the storage areas. And so that to me is the only inside report other than what you already mentioned, like the Point Pleasant
Hmm.
stuff. Because you're right, that was being reported in the TNT area and specifically buildings out there. But yeah, with these newer sightings, in the Chicago and greater sort of Midwestern Great Lakes region, yeah, that's the only sighting I can think of that would have been inside.
Yeah, I'm looking, I don't think we had any others. Interesting. Okay, next question. Can Squatch. Are the airport still telling employees not to talk about the Mothman sightings? Well, I I did talk to my confidential informant about 2 months ago. This individual is a supervisor with one of the airlines, and they told me that the sighting people talking about it has kind of lessened a bit, but unless people are just scared to death, because they really clamped down on people. I mean, there were people coming to me, and I know to Manuel, and saying that there were issues and that they were being threatened with their jobs and such. But no, this individual who I have been talking to now for almost 2 years has did tell me that the reports have lessened some. So I don't know what's that's about. What do you think?
I don't know what to think, honestly. I kind of struggle with a lot of the O'Hare stuff because
Mhm.
I haven't been able to verify much of it. And so, I trust you, of course, and we've worked together on enough cases, and I have, and we've communicated with enough of the same witnesses where, If generally speaking, if you say you talk to somebody, I believe you. But a lot of those other O'Hare reports, they've just never been able to be verified. So I don't know. I can't say with any confidence how many people were being, threatened with unemployment, or if anybody was. Honestly, I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I don't know that it did. So
I do
it's
know it
hard to say.
has happened. Now I don't know if it's specific. This person who I've been talking to did mention that employees were told. And I did talk to a gentleman who was a former pilot and knew several people who worked at O'Hare, who told me, and I posted on the blog, who told me that there were repercussions with some individuals who made reports. So I don't know. I don't know. But it's interesting that we haven't had any reports out of O'Hare since January. So you and I haven't received any. And Manuel has kind of taken a back seat. He's got other things going on. So we haven't been able to get anything from O'Hare, though we've still gotten some reports. So, yeah. So, that being said, Brian McGlade, any more reports from police or firemen? No. The supposed sightings of the firemen at O'Hare was kind of the last ones we got. I haven't received or talked to any police officers since then, though we have had a lot of police officers come forward. We've had police officers who are on duty and several retired police officers that had seen things and had talked about it. So, but recently, no, we haven't received anything.
Yeah, nothing super recent. One of my favorite reports actually came from a retired Chicago officer named David Ramos, who was willing to go on the record about his experience. I was able to verify his employment. He was a 15-year vet of the Chicago Police Department. And his sighting was when he was a kid back in 1971, and he said he saw this thing by the North Branch of the Chicago River, and that's one that's always kind of stuck out to me, and I wish it got more attention, frankly, because it's such an interesting sighting. What he describes is fascinating, and on top of that, he is a credentialed policeman. Like you can verify that yourself. And so if that means something to you, if that lends him more credibility, then it's an important detail. But we don't have a lot of anybody like that who's actually willing to put themselves out there and attach their name to a sighting. As far as I know, he might be the only one, actually.
Yeah.
Who's actually gone on the record and has a verifiable service record. And so, that's interesting, because you look at people like that and, he has a reputation, like he has a lot to lose. And it's only because he retired and had since moved to Florida that he decided, well, screw it, I'll go ahead and talk about this. Like, who cares? Like, what are they going to do to me now if people in Chicago are laughing at me? Well, I live in Florida, whatever. So
well, of course, we had the sighting in 2017 in the Auburn section of the city, where there was a crowd of people and two police officers apparently saw this thing, and then the one contacted us. And I filed a FOIA. I think you filed a FOIA. Nothing. The only thing we got was they had no record of it. Right. But the way I verified that was because somebody who was in the crowd came forward a couple of days later with me and told me that, that actually happened. So, yeah. So,
that one
and
is,
I had go ahead.
Oh, Oh, okay. Yeah, that one
Go
is
ahead.
it's a contentious case, of course,
Hmm.
because there is that missing police report. And there are a couple ways to explain that. Of course, the first one being that it's made up, and the second one being that there is some kind of conspiracy to
Hmm.
hide the phenomenon. And people can believe whichever of those they like. I think, but it is. I don't blame. I wouldn't blame anybody for looking at that and finding it suspicious, right? And so while it's an interesting case,
Hmm.
I don't think it's one of the best examples we have, in terms of overall credibility. I mean, we've both spoken to like directly with witnesses that are willing to put themselves out there and have verifiable, sort of details and evidence and things. So yeah, it's an interesting sighting, but that missing police report is going to haunt it forever.
Absolutely. Let's see. Marla Snyder. People always report bat-like wings. Do you get any reports of feathered wings? We did earlier. Uh, we had insectoid wings, and we had the owl man sightings with owl-like wings, owl-like faces. Occasionally, we will get one. I can't remember the last time we got one with the wing feathers, but we have received them. But
Oh yeah.
early on, we had most of the ones that, other than maybe one or two that came directly from MUFON originally, were of feathered wings or insectoid wings.
Yeah, definitely. I think let's see, maybe two out of the three of the 2017 spring MUFON sightings that sort of kicked off things that year
Hmm.
were described as bird-like, and then the third I think was described as more of a giant bat. And
Hmm.
it's been split relatively evenly, or at least it was for some time. Maybe it's leaning more towards bat-like now. I think that a lot of people are sort of describing a general shape of the wings. And I've had people who have described bird wings as looking bat-like, and it's been verifiable that what they saw was a bird. So take that for what it's worth. Some people have described feathers, sure. Some people have described hair. Some people have described something that they weren't sure if it was feathers or hair. And so I think it is understandable to see some level of variation in those descriptions, right? Like, I think it's possible that even if one person says bird like and one person says bat like, what we're really experiencing is the normal human difference in perception that you would expect from multiple eyewitnesses.
Yeah. Um, Jose Sanchez, could Mothman be the leftover reptilian from the dinosaur era? Well, I, I I really don't see any evidence of these being a relic of some type. Uh, we've got theories about where these things come from, how they manifest, and but it's nothing that's proven. Um, I don't know. What do you think about that, Tobias?
Uh, yeah, I mean, anything's possible, right? But there's no specific evidence, I think, that would point towards that being true. So, everything's fair game right now. I think we can speculate about any potential origin, and they'd all be equally true because we don't actually have any idea right now. But in terms of likelihood, in terms of any evidence to point to that, not really. And I think the main issue for me is if you're talking about like a relic species, if this is supposed to be something like a cryptid, That is to say, some sort of biological undiscovered animal species, then there are a lot of uncomfortable questions we have to start asking ourselves. Like, well, first and foremost, how does it fly? Its wingspan isn't nearly big enough for it to be able to fly. What does it eat? There's no evidence of predation that needs to be accounted for in any existing animal species in these areas. Like if there was some relic species kind of hiding out, it should be eating something. And as big as it is, and as big as the breeding population would have to be for it to exist, there should be an appreciable number of animals being noticeably eaten in these areas, and there's not. And so,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's the matter of habitat, like where is it living? Something that size, again, with the breeding population necessary for it to exist. There's no place for it to really live where it would be unnoticed in these areas. And so everything kind of points away from a natural biological explanation. And so pretty much anything that relies on it being in undiscovered animal species, to me, at this point, everything kind of contradicts that.
Well, if this thing was indigenous and spent its time on our airplane, you would think it'd be at least some missing pets and stuff coming up, or we'd be hearing something about that.
Sure.
And we haven't heard anything like that at all. So take it for what it's worth, I guess. But, they don't seem to be feeding while they're here.
Yeah, true. That's another good point. You don't really get reports of any kind of predatory behavior. You don't see people reporting watching Mothman, eat a bird out of the air or anything like that. There just doesn't
Mm-hmm.
seem to be that kind of behavior present.
Okay, race fan. Lon, have you or any of your team talked to any of the people that worked at the airport that saw the Mothman? I did briefly talk to the air traffic controller, and I did talk to one of the pilots briefly. But honestly, I'd say 95% of it came out of the airport came through Manuel. Now, why people weren't, or why we weren't getting access to that, I don't know. But it's been a contentious point from the very beginning with us. I didn't want to make a whole lot about it, but the whole airport thing, I mean, they're interesting accounts. But we're just not getting enough to justify a lot of those sightings. And you and I both kind of backed off on a lot of that.
Oh, definitely. There comes a point where you have to consider your own credibility and whether or not you want to lend it to something that doesn't have the evidence to support its reality. And so when it comes to those O'Hare sightings, unfortunately, the vast majority of them simply haven't been verified. And so I can't sit here and tell you that they didn't happen, but I also sure as hell am not going to sit here and tell you that they did. And I'm not going to say with any confidence that they did. I've spoken to exactly one person. His name was Daniel, and he said that he worked in the cargo area, and he saw this large winged red-eyed being while driving out to meet some friends after work. I think he was going to go meet them for a drink or something. And so he was driving along West Higgins after after leaving work, and he said he saw this thing standing in this large grassy area behind this tall fence, and he could kind of judge its size based on the height of this fence. And so, he thought it was 7 or 8 feet tall. And, I spoke to him directly, and, he seemed as authentic, I think, as you could imagine under those circumstances, and, he gave me a map of the area and sort of drew on it where he said he saw everything. And so I didn't have any reason, or that is to say, I have no evidence that what he said was not representative of his experience. So as far as I could tell, without any evidence to the contrary, what I like to do is I will approach a case as though what the witness is telling me is their authentic experience. And so everything that was verifiable that he shared with me was verified. And so that was the one case that I have from O'Hare where I can say, hey, maybe this guy actually saw something. Everything else, and some of the stories get pretty wild. They're just, for something as bizarre as some of them are, when you start talking about, government interference and people being hushed and everything. I'm sorry, I need more than second or third hand accounts all coming from one person. And I don't think that's unreasonable, and it's not meant to be offensive to anybody either. For instance, if I were sharing stories and they were all second or third hand, and somebody was like, hey, I don't believe any of this, I'd be like, you know what? I don't blame you. Like, that's a perfectly reasonable stance to have. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I have to come down on most of these O'Hare sightings right now.
Well, I mean, we got to be honest. First of all, we did film an episode of documentary that is going to be coming out eventually. And you and I, and we made it clear we were not going to talk about the O'Hare sightings. And, because we just did not have any evidence to back up any of that, because we talked to very few people. Now, I have talked to people who've seen these things around O'Hare.
Oh yeah.
Bensonville and Rosemont and other areas. Absolutely. Yep. But as far as actual people at the airport, I have talked to very few. In fact, I did have one guy. Let's see. We had I had 3 people I talked to that saw it who reported seeing it at O'Hare. And the one was a gentleman who was actually got pushed back, told to get back into his car by one of the security people after several of those cargo people had seen this being. And there were like 8 or 9 vehicles that showed up when this thing was reported. And he happened to be driving in the area because he was leaving work. He was working at O'Hare. And he got out and pulled out his phone, and he was told to get back into the car and to get out of there. And I talked to him. So, and of course, like I said, I had the one lady who I've been working with, who's the supervisor, who told me that people that work for her have been telling her that they have seen it. And I do believe her because I know her brother. And, but they don't want to report it. So I don't think she really wanted to be a part of the actual reports herself. I'll be honest with you. But yeah. So there you go. So folks, when this thing does come out, you can be assured that there are going to be sightings that we can verify, and for the most part, and yeah. So, and I tell you, I'll be honest with you. We're not really done with it yet, but and we can't really say a whole lot, but it's I think it's going to be a very good production.
Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly. I think people will will be very interested to see what we've come up with there. But you're right, we really shouldn't talk too much about
No.
it yet. So that's about as far as we can go.
Yeah, and but I'm quite sure people are going to like it, but I just wanted to put that caveat in there because when they do talk about it, the airport is not going to be part of much of it. There's going to be some mentions of
Right.
it, but I don't think there's going to be anything beyond that. But they are going to have witnesses who we have personally talked to. So and
Yes.
people you have in person as well. So absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I think that when it comes to O'Hare, well, in that particular instance, just like I basically just said the same thing I already said tonight. So, and that I have
Mhm.
been saying for some time now. So it shouldn't be any surprise to anybody who's ever heard me talk about it at this
Yeah.
point. So,
Well, it was it was one of those things I figured that we should say tonight. So make that caveat. So, if anything does happen at a hair that we can get some real tangible and evidence, and even though it may be anecdotal, um, we will come forward with it. But
I
we're
would love
just not
that if
getting that. Yeah,
yeah, if you work at O'Hare, if you know somebody who works at O'Hare, have them contact us. Have them reach out.
absolutely.
We respect confidentiality. You can be anonymous as long as we can, verify your employment, which again will be kept completely secret. You don't see us ever out here outing witnesses. That never happens. Lon and I both have impeccable records as far as maintaining a witness's trust and confidence. So yeah, I mean, if you've ever even been tempted to come forward with a story like that, and you know something about O'Hare, you can trust us. You should reach out.
Okay, next question. Piggy in the middle. Are they actually flying, or are they somehow defying gravity? Well, I that's kind of a loaded question. We we don't know. They're flying. I mean, people are seeing them in the air, and but many times it seems like they have propulsion abilities that are just not natural. I mean, they're supernatural, basically. Even when I had my encounter in Pennsylvania, the thing didn't flap its wings; it just literally took off, and that's very similar to what we're getting in Chicago now. Uh, Sometimes people see them actually flap their wings, but for the most part, these things seem to defy any physics. I mean, what do you think about that, Tobias?
Sure. Well, this is part of the point that I had brought up earlier, where if you look at the dimensions as described, it shouldn't be possible for these things to fly, because you're talking about something between 6 and 8 feet tall with only a 12 to 15-foot wingspan. Well, that's not enough wingspan. That even if it had hollow bones or something, it shouldn't be able to fly with those dimensions. And so, yeah, I mean, if we're talking about the difference between flying using normal winged flight mechanics, right, like just normal locomotion, then no, I don't suppose I think it is flying that way. I think it must be in defiance of what we know about physics, and that's how it's flying, whether that's manipulating gravity or using telekinesis, or we can only speculate. But no, because of the seeming impossibility of it flying using any sort of normal means, yeah, I would assume that
Mhm.
there would likely be some paranormal aspect to it.
Yeah. There is one case that I do want to talk about, and we got it back in September of along Camp Pine Woods road, that roadway. Yeah, and you and I both looked into that, where it was near the Des Plaines River, just northeast of here, where the woman was driving and saw the thing standing on the side of the road. You talked to her as well, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That was an interesting one.
Yeah, she
That
went to
really
pick up
was.
some pizza or went to a chicken place or something.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And
Um,
she was on her way out, and she had had sort of a brain fog or something. Like she was distracted, but it was more than that. Like she just felt out of
yeah.
it, right? And yeah, that's so interesting because
Well, I do know that I got a
Mhm,
couple of people contact me. I, and I had a couple people contact me and just say that that area where it was seen at
mhm.
has a lot of activity that happens there. Um, so I don't know. I mean, she was pretty profound about it, but she didn't know what it was. I mean, she drove by and she said it was just standing on the side of the road. She didn't know what the hell it was.
Right.
But
Well, no, I
she
mean it
described it basically the same of what everybody else has been.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, no, she definitely did, and it was definitely impactful, like, you could tell, like, I spoke to
Yeah.
her directly, and I know you did too, and, it certainly
Hmm.
seemed as though she had experienced something, and, the description she gave, generally matched, what other credible people had been saying that they had seen, which
Yeah.
was certainly interesting, and that weird brain fog that she was talking about was interesting. I've often wondered if there is some some importance to the correlation we find in these sightings between people being kind of distracted, doing things like driving or just like out sort of aimlessly, going for a walk or something, and seeing these beings as though maybe being in a sort of semi-altered state of consciousness makes it more likely for whatever reason for you to have this kind of encounter. And so, maybe if she had
Yeah.
been suffering from some kind of brain fog like that, it just put her in the right state of mind to have this kind of experience.
Mm. Let's see here. Christine Murphy. So many cryptids everywhere, and most are never reported. Unfortunately, that's the case. But people are, I'll be quite frank with you. We know for a fact that there's a lot of sightings in and around the Chicago area that we're just not getting. But the fact that we do have as many as we have, I think, is a testament to people wanting to know what is really going on. So, I mean, what do you think about that?
Oh, in terms of the sightings that we're receiving, like the number of them,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
it's a complicated issue because
yeah.
you have to wonder how many sightings are going unreported. Like for instance, the most common narrative that I'm given by witnesses surrounding their experience just after having this kind of sighting is that it's very powerful and it's impactful. They want to share it. We're social creatures, right? And so they will go to a loved one, could be a close friend, could be a spouse, a parent, a sibling, whatever, and they want to get this off their chest, and they want to talk to somebody about it. And so they'll talk to this person that they feel like they should be able to trust implicitly. And the reaction they receive most often is to be laughed at. They get made fun of,
Hmm.
and then they don't ever talk about it again. Because they don't think anybody else has ever seen anything like this. And it's only when they find somebody like me or Lon or anybody, watching or listening to this, who might actually take them seriously, that they will talk about it. I remember talking to this guy Gerald, And but he was an old man when I talked to him several years ago, and he wanted to report a sighting that he had seen in 1957 when he was only a teenager. And he said to me that he was glad that he had found me. He was glad that he had seen this article that I had written, so he knew that somebody else had seen something similar, and so he could come forward and report his sighting to me before he died, which is pretty morbid, but it makes you think, right? Like, how many people are
Yeah.
there who have taken these experiences with them to their grave because they didn't think that anybody else had ever seen anything, and they were just going to get made fun of if they talked about it. I'm guessing it's probably quite a few. Now, Mothman is well known to you and I, right? But outside of our weird circles, nobody knows who Mothman is. If I asked if any of my grandparents were still alive and I were to ask them who Mothman was, they wouldn't know. Nobody in my family would know if they weren't related to me, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
most people have no idea that this stuff exists, and so they don't talk about it unless they find somebody like us. And so I've always thought that when it comes to things like quote unquote flaps, I don't know how much importance I would give them, because I think what we're dealing with isn't an issue of increased incidents. I think it's an issue of increased reporting, where you get a well publicized report that leads to many more reports. And I think that's what we're seeing in Chicago versus other areas around Lake Michigan, and really other areas all over North America and all over this continent, right? Is that it's not necessarily that there are more sightings here. The only thing we can say with any certainty is that there are more sightings being reported here. Because I think weird stuff happens everywhere, and I think it happens about evenly everywhere based on what I've seen after having done this for 15 years or so.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's see if we got any last minute questions here. Brian McGlade, Carlos Castatina reports Mothman like being in one of his books. I don't know. I don't remember seeing that anywhere. Do you know anything about that, Tobias?
No. Who was that again?
Carlos Castaneda.
Oh, okay. Huh. No, I don't recall seeing that. If somebody wants to share a link to an article or a reference or something, I would be interested.
Okay, folks. Well, I want to thank you all for coming on tonight. And hey, Tobias, thanks for dropping in. Well,
Thanks for having me.
I know we're going to get together and do something before the episode eventually comes out. But yeah, the Hollywood strike, the writer's strike, and all that just screwed everything up, unfortunately. So yeah, so I don't know what's going to come out, but I'm looking forward to seeing it. And hopefully, and one thing you and I both have been saying is when this does come out, and the quality, I think that was, and the amount of care that was put into it, and hell, the way we were treated like kings. I think people are going to be very happy with it.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people put a lot of hard work into this, and I think the end result is going to be something that people can be very proud of. And I think it's very it's very witness centric. It puts the witnesses' experiences first, and I think that is the best and only way to approach these subjects. And so, I think it's going to be very informative.
So, tell folks how they can get a hold of your books again, and what if you have anything you and Emily are into or looking into, tell them about it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, if you want to keep up with what we're doing at the Singular Fortean Society, you can always go to our website, singularfortean.com. And if you go to singularfortean.com/books, of course, you can find all three of our books that are out right now: The Lake Michigan Mothman, High Strangeness in the Midwest, Strange Tales of the Impossible, and the Singular Fortean Society's Yuletide Guide to High Strangeness. We are also all over social media. So you can follow the Singular Fortean Society on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, just all of it. We actually have a Discord server now too. So if you're interested in that, we've got a pretty cool community of open-minded, like-minded, interested people who love talking about all of this kind of weird stuff. So if you ever want to chat online, you can find us on Discord as well. I've got some appearances coming up next year, but the one coming up the fastest is going to be Dead of Winter in February down in Alton, Illinois. So keep your eyes peeled for more on that, since that's just a couple months away. Hard to believe it, but it's true. But yeah, otherwise, reach out to us through the website or through social media if you have any experiences you want to share, or if you're an O'Hare employee, please, for the love of God. Like
Absolutely.
that, I'd love to speak to one, but yeah, I think otherwise that's generally everywhere you can find us.
Well, Tobias, thanks for coming on. And like I said, we'll be back on together and doing this again eventually. And yeah, so folks, buy the book. I mean, it looks very interesting. I actually bought it recently. I'm going to look at it. So yeah. So you take care, and we'll be keeping people updated on this thing in Chicago and the surrounding areas. So you have a good weekend. Stay healthy, and I'll talk to you soon, Tobias.
All right. Thanks, Lon.
Okay, take care. So, folks, I want to thank each and all of you for coming on and watching and chatting. If you did donate, it's truly appreciated. Your support is what makes all this possible. So please like, subscribe, and share. And if you have a sighting, encounter, or report that you would like to be considered for the personal report show, posted at Phantoms and Monsters, feel free to contact me at Lon Strickler at phantomsandmonsters.com. So all I can say is next week, we're going to have a Christmas special next Friday night. I'm going to have several members of the team on. We'll be talking creepy Christmas reports. So that'll be a bit of fun. So until then, you all have a good weekend, and I'll be talking to you soon. Thank you.